So you looked at a house last weekend, it is your dream home, you've decided to put it in an offer. Well, guess what? So did 20 other people. How are you gonna win this thing? How are you gonna make sure that your offer is the most competitive out of the bunch? Stick around, we're gonna break this down for you today. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is your Central Maine realtor, Nick Isgro with eXp Realty, and today I'm gonna break down all of the elements, if you will, the important elements to try to tweak your offer when you find yourself very likely this spring in a multiple offer scenario. Which elements are going to be the ones that you can tweak to make sure that your offer stands out among the rest and becomes more and more competitive so you can win that multiple offer scenario. Now, if you're a seller and you're like, why am I watching this video? Well, you're gonna have to sit down and go through these offers, so you really need to start thinking about what is going to be in your best interest, and we probably are going to hit on those things today. Now, before I get into any of that, I want to welcome you here to the channel. If you've never been here before, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, particularly right here in the Central Maine market. If that's of interest to you or adds value to your process in the buying and selling of homes, let's do us a quick favor. Go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, knock that little alarm bell. You'll be notified every time I put out new content. All right, we got a lot of elements to cover here. I want to kick this right off with the first and probably the most obvious, but also the most important. If you are in a multiple offer scenario, do not underbid on that house. I know it's tempting. We've spent the last 6 months, right, telling you that we were seeing price reductions, we were seeing slowdowns in the market. That's all gone. This spring market has really raged back, somewhat like we were in last spring, although as we've seen, there's even fewer homes that are coming to the market. So, I just had some folks this morning, we were looking at what would be available in their criteria in like 6 towns that they're looking for. There was like 3 houses available. When you're in this kind of scenario, it could be tempting to think about stories you've heard of other people that have been in very different markets offering below the asking price. Don't do it. If you're in a multiple offer scenario, the asking price is the starting point of your bid. Now, there's other elements we can look at too, and we're going to get into those, but this is going to be one of the most important. Now, you can often offer more than asking price, and this is where you really want to work with your real estate professional. Whatever realtor you're working with, run the comps. You want to make sure that this home is going to be valued, especially if you have to have an appraisal at the price that you're offering. But what's happening right now a lot is there are homes that are going on significantly underpriced. There'll be an open house, and what that real estate agent is doing is driving the effect of pushing multiple offer scenarios, which means pushing that value to go up over the asking price. And in some cases, you're looking at $50,000, $60,000 over asking. That's not because the home is just like crazy overvalued. It's because it was actually listed under the market price, and that sense of value is seen there by the buyers. So work through the scenarios, look at what the pricing is, offer your strongest price that you're willing to pay for that home. The next thing we want to look at, which should be somewhat obvious, but it's not always, is closing costs. Again, very tempting sometimes, particularly if you don't have a lot of money for a down payment, to try to get some of your closing costs worked into the offer. In this case, you don't want to do that. To make your offer more competitive, you're trying to win that multiple offer scenario. You want to make sure that you are not asking the seller to pay your closing costs. And if you are, at the very least, you want to cook that into the price that you offer. So maybe you offer even a little bit more than you would have if you're asking for that back. But I would recommend strongly, if you can, don't ask for it at all. In fact, even though there's not a lot of closing costs that the seller is responsible for, there's things like deed prep and things like that, you could offer actually to pay for the seller's closing costs. The cost is going to be minimal, but it's a signal to the seller, thinking about getting inside that seller's mind of what speaks to the seller. Imagine the seller looking and saying, wow, not only are they not asking for me to pay their closing costs, because somebody else probably will in that bunch, but also, hey, look, they're willing to pick up the tab for mine. It's a small cost when you look at the overall cost that you're going to be faced buying that home, but it could have a big impact in how your offer is looked at. Another variable you want to look at is how quickly can you close. Now, this could be a tricky one, and one of the things I like to do is call the seller's agent and say, look, we're about to make an offer on the home. What is the best case scenario for your clients as far as closing? Sometimes they might want a quick close, and that's what, obviously cash can offer often, but even banks can work on a faster timeline, more so on a conventional loan, less so on a government-backed loan. But Regardless of that, if you can close, 30 days, if you can close in 15 days, even better if the title company can do it that quickly. But maybe the seller doesn't want that. So don't always assume the seller wants a quick timeline. The seller might actually want a little bit longer. So what I would recommend when it comes to closing time, have your agent reach out to that selling agent and just ask, what is the best case scenario for closing for your clients, and try to get your offer to line up as close as you can within your abilities, obviously, to getting that closing date right in line with what those sellers are looking for. The next thing you want to look at is your contingencies. And this is one that gets a little tricky because we never ever recommend as agents that you waive inspections, but you do want to try to look at, are you able to waive a lot of the contingencies that are in your offer? The biggest contingency is always the inspections. What we saw a year ago was very wild and crazy. A lot of people were just totally waiving inspections, saying just forget it, waive them. Move on. If you don't want to do that, there's actually a way you can still get your inspections and give yourself a little bit of breathing room without scaring away the seller on the offer. That is to say, look, we're going to add a time frame here where we can come in and get our inspections, but we can guarantee through the offer we are not going to ask the seller to cover any costs, any repairs. So that's you saying, look, we want to know about the house, we want to know what we're getting into. It protects you on that side of it, giving you that contingency period to have your inspections, decide do you want to buy the house or not. But you are guaranteeing the seller you're not going to ask them to cover any of the costs. That's a great compromise way to get your inspections, but also make the offer as strong as possible and signal to the seller, hey look, we're not going to come ask you for any more money. The next up is the earnest deposit. So earnest deposit is one of those variables that are in the contract that not everyone pays a ton of attention to. Usually it's, we get a question of how much should I offer, or can I put $1,000 down on this, or $5,000, does that work? I would say if you are in a multiple offer scenario and it's important to you to win this bid, put as much earnest deposit down as you can, because that's going to signal to the seller this person's serious. They've obviously got some cash, so they're going to be a strong buyer when they're coming to the closing table. They're willing to put a lot of the skin in the game right on the front end. And you could also have it so you put some earnest deposit down now, and then after inspections you write in there that you're going to add even more after that period. So there's multiple ways of doing this, but the more you can put down and show the seller that you are a very serious buyer, you're willing to make a commitment right on the front end, the more likely that they're going to look at your offer and say, this is a person who's likely to get to the closing table. The last couple of things I want to cover here are some addendums that you can add to your contract to make them more competitive in that multiple offer scenario. The first is the escalation clause, the escalation addendum. What is the escalation addendum? Basically, this addendum allows you to say, we're going to offer, let's say, $200,000. However, we are willing to offer $5,000 or $10,000. Could be any amount. We're going to use this just as an example. We're going to offer $5,000 more than any other buyer, up to $250,000, $260,000, whatever your cap is. Why is this an important piece of the contract? Why would you use this? I like it a lot. It's actually helped me win a couple of offers this year already. It's actually helped my sellers choose some offers as well. I've been on both sides of this. And what it does for the buyer is say, look, I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to give you the highest bid. It gives you the upside protection because you're only going to offer so much more than their next highest offer. So you don't necessarily need to max out depending on what other offers they get. So you have some downside protection, some upside protection, and it basically makes your contract that you're offering, it makes your contract one that allows you to start at a lower point but then continue to rise in price until your cap maximum amount of price that you're willing to offer. But it doesn't mean you're necessarily offering that max amount if they don't have other offers on the table. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the appraisal gap, because as people get into these crazy scenarios, as people start offering over the asking price, even by quite a bit, especially if it's a non-conventional loan, but this works for conventional loans as well, anything that has a loan attached to it, you're going to have to need an appraisal, because the bank is going to send out the appraiser to make sure that the asset is actually worth what they're going to back it for. Now, the appraisal gap is something you can offer to say, look, we understand this might not appraise. If this doesn't appraise, we're willing to provide X amount of dollars to cover the gap between what the bank is willing to lend and the amount that we said we could purchase. Now, you might be able to offer $10,000, $20,000. That amount is the variable in there, but you're telling the seller, I'm going to be able to cover more money if this doesn't actually appraise for what we're offering. That makes the seller relax a little bit, because you know they're looking at these offers, they're going to start to ask, do you think it's really going to appraise for that amount? This is where the appraisal gap comes in and can put them at ease. So I know we just ran through a lot very quickly, but there's a lot of things that go into these offers. At the end of the day, we covered a lot of things here, but what I want you to do, if you are a buyer and you're looking at a house, you really want the house, you're in this multiple offer scenario, is I really want it. A, how bad do you want it? Which things are you willing to lose the contract for? Because you might not want to say that you're going to waive contingencies, or you might not want to offer the appraisal gap necessarily if it's not going to appraise. You need to decide which things are important to you, but you want to get yourself, more importantly than anything, into the mind of the seller. What is the seller thinking? What is the seller going to think when they're looking at other offers? What are some other things that that seller might see where we could tweak and edge somebody else out? What is the likelihood that somebody else is going to do these things? What can we do to stand out above the rest and make that seller really warm up to the offer that we presented? Now that's really it for today. Just a down and dirty way to say, how do we win a multiple offer scenario in 2023? Those are my top ideas for advice. What do you guys think? Maybe you've been in the market over the last couple of years. Some of you guys out there I know actually were in these scenarios, either on the sale side or on the buy side. What was your experience? Go ahead, drop a comment below. Would love to get some of those examples or talk about what your ideas, or maybe even I missed something, go ahead and drop it down there. Now, of course, as always, I thank each and every one of you for sticking around to the end of this video, and until the next one, I'll see you next time.